Let's give a big Clark College welcome to today's speaker, Adriana Vela, who's going to talk about trends, technology, trajectories.
Oh my!
Thank you, Bruce, for that really exciting introduction. I'm glad you have your students all lined up here. Well, first things first. Let's see. I've got $50 here. 50 for the first person who can tell me what this introduction, this talk is about. Nope.
It's predicting future trends.
Nope.
Analytics?
Nope. Anybody else?
Pizza?
$50, man. $50.
She told me that she knew it. There's something to do with mind mapping.
Well,
Can I answer it?
It's mind mapping.
Oh yes. What? What was that?
Is it about? It's basically. Is it about like the history of technology and the trend is going forward?
No.
No.
Not at all. Okay.
Is
One
it about where
more
we're going
guess.
in the
Last
future
guess.
with
Last guess.
artificial intelligence?
No.
No.
Business.
Okay. Yeah.
Business.
No.
Business. What?
Discount for company.
And time's up. No. This. So sorry. You may have another chance, but okay. This talk is actually about you.
That was my next answer.
You had your chance, but you blew it. It's about you in 8 lessons, 8 condensed lessons that are meant to give you or arm you at least with some beginner tools to basically be successful in business web services and whatever else you are going for. So these 8 lessons, I'm actually borrowing from the multi-storytelling model that was popularized by Quentin Tarantino in his movie Pulp Fiction. Any fans here? Great, good. You'll definitely find the references hopefully amusing. And my goal then with this, okay, is that you don't leave this room thinking that this is all just a lot of talk. If you remember that reference, they talk too much, don't they? But my favorite character there is the wolf, and largely because he introduces himself. I am Winston Wolfe. I solve problems. I fantasize that so much, saying, "Hi, I'm Adriana Vela. I solve problems." And because I just love, what he does. And if he were here today, he would be saying, "Pretty pleased with sugar on top. Pay attention if you want to get something out of this." Okay? So I will talk fast. I will move fast, and that's just the way I am. So. And I really do prefer just to keep the flow, to hold questions until the end, but if it's a really burning question, go for it, okay? So, lesson 1, we're all made up of 3 basic elements. What are they? Okay, money.
Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen.
No, it's not a chemistry class.
Mind, body, spirit.
No, it's not a religious class. Anybody else? No? God, don't give up so quickly. There's real money on the table. Jeez.
Can you repeat the question again?
Huh? Each of us are comprised of 3 basic elements. Which are they? You can tell the analytical. That's okay. It's perfectly fine. Anybody else? Okay, I'm moving. All right. Time's up. The 3 basic elements are your IQ, EQ, and your personality. And why is this important? Well, there's several important things about this. First of all, your IQ. You need to know that that will remain fairly stable for your lifetime. And what that means is that the potential IQ that you grow up with, that you were born with, will be the one you die with, barring, of course, brain damage injury. Your personality is very close to the same. It doesn't matter whether you're an introvert, extrovert, whether you are an analytical or a driver. That will be the foundation of your personality. And yes, of course, you can teach yourself to get out of that comfort zone, for specific situations, first interviews, or asking for that raise, or meeting your new girlfriend's or boyfriend's parents. But the EQ is different. What's EQ? Anybody?
Emotional quotient.
Extrovert?
Great, and that was, by the way, there's no money there, so sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll give you $1. You can get it later. The EQ is, yes, as the emotional quotient, and also known as emotional intelligence. And this is a very, very important part of the whole person. Now, unlike IQ and personality, which really you can't do very much to change them, your EQ is something that you can leverage and ratchet up. Why? Because it's comprised of a lot of different skills that are important. Well, what are these skills? Well, they are different skills like decision-making skills, social skills, stress tolerance, anger management, assertiveness, change tolerance, communication, all of these skills, and they are foundational and critical for you to have, regardless of what it is that you're going to set out to do. And much like this tree would grow when you feed it and nurture it and take care of it, you can only grow your career to the extent that you grow yourself. Okay? These are going to be major data points. So where do you start? It starts with what you see, because what you see drives what you do. Okay, this is a very condensed lesson. There's a lot more that goes into this. So what you see is your self-awareness. You need to develop that self-awareness. What triggers you? What pisses you off? What makes you excel? Makes you happy? But what are the triggers? What did somebody say that affected you in a certain way? To the extent that you really tune and hone that, your self-awareness, you will then be able to manage yourself and make sure that you manage, your personal competence. Now, it's not just you and your personal competence. Obviously, there's a social competence factor here, and that means being aware of those around you. How did they react to things you said or did? And to the extent that you can actually do that, then you can manage those relationships. Okay? Let's convert this to your profession. Professional competence, that can only happen if you start paying attention to your ecosystem, becoming aware of it. Ecosystem is not like, you have your ecosystem at home, you have your ecosystem at work, in school, you have it in your church or not church, but this is more than that. What's happening in the industry in which you want to play? What's happening in other industries that could affect that industry? The more you can be aware of that, the more you can manage your career. So that this way, like Wayne Gretzky, you will be where the puck is and not where it's going to be, not where it was. Okay? And therefore you have to know thyself and not put your foot in your mouth like John Travolta does here. He mouthed off to the wolf. He said, I just don't like people barking orders at me, that's all. So he had to apologize. So if you're not progressing, you're regressing. So keep moving forward. Who said this? Okay, no, nobody. That was Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Okay? And I will mention a little bit more about him. So that's the thing. This is not something that you just do like you do a class and it goes from this date to this date. your self-awareness, your building of your EQ skills is something that you would continue to do. It's like your resumes. It's a living document. You have to continue building it and nurturing it. Lesson 2. I used to use this GIF when I would talk about nanotechnology and what it means to track nanotechnology. But this applies to bigger pictures. And the fact of the matter is there's always so many moving parts. So much is happening here and there. And you can call each one of these sections anything. Let's see, no? Why is this not working?
Technology.
Yeah, technology, there you have it. It was working perfectly fine earlier today. But anyway, like I said, there were a lot of moving parts all the time, and it's very, very difficult to keep track of everything that's going on. Now, the one thing that's actually nice of this is that it is perfectly synchronized, the movements, and it is fixed. So in a lot of ways it's passive, and it's just entertaining, right? But what if it wasn't fixed? What if it wasn't synchronized? Well, then you have real life. So, let's see, since I can't see the next one. So here you have it then, megatrends. Let's see, I did this mainly for me, not because I think you're gonna see it, but you will see it. I'm happy to send the file on this one so you can look at it more carefully. But the bottom line is that this takes a stab at what megatrends are coming or would be coming and what impacts them or what triggered them to occur. And this is when you take into account other trends, like trends in society and trends in work, economy, money, food, technology, retail, environment, media, transport, politics, energy, education, health, security, and values. All of these have impact on what happens in our ecosystem. The big dots here, these gray ones, those are megatrends. The small circles are what's going on right now. And the triangles are what could be next, based on that. And then of course there's things like things that are in partial ruin and dangerous currents that are occurring in that area. Some of these megatrends could be, the rise of Africa, rising inequality, simplicity, too much information, ambiguity, tribalism. All that stuff can happen or is happening because of other factors. And I, of course, will not go through this in any more detail because that could take a long time. But there's also several global game changers that would occur. Game changers like severe food shortages, oil price shock, those things always have a ripple effect. Destabilization of China. So there's a lot of things that can go on a worldwide basis that affects, how things move. Well, so with that, let's just take a little bit of a history turn and review how many years it took for some of these technologies to reach 50 million users. Obviously it says here the automobile 62, telephone 50 years, electricity 48, credit card 28 years. So as you can see, they've taken less and less time to reach that. And largely is because some of these preceding technologies enable them to do more. Notice the internet took 7 years, but do notice PayPal, which took only 5 years. What that tells you, or what you should surmise from that, is that PayPal was a very early user of the internet. And they had been paying attention to these trends. They knew that ATMs were already, by that time, they were already very, pretty prevalent. People use credit cards all the time, so they purchased electronically, and the debit cards. So they didn't start after the internet reached their 50 million. No, you can bet that they were already there, because this was a game changer. And does anybody know who founded PayPal?
Elon Musk is one.
That's right. So he is an example of a person who really pays attention so that he can be there and ready to make his move. And this doesn't have to be, starting a company. I mean, that's great if you want to start one, but it has everything to do with what your next moves are. It has everything to do with your EQ. Again, being self-aware, being aware of your ecosystem. So, technology, of course, in and of itself has an adoption cycle. This is the crossing the chasm. Anybody familiar with this? Okay, this was a concept that came up from Geoffrey Moore in 1991. In fact, he wrote a book. He's wrote several books. And I had the fortune to have taken classes from Geoffrey Moore. He's not a professor or anything. He is an industry, he's a venture capitalist and an industry analyst. And was working for Hewlett Packard at the time, and they paid $10,000 per class. It was just a week class. I took 2 of those. And what he shows here in this model is that buyers, this is a buyer perspective, okay? So you have to understand that there's different types of buyers. There's the innovator buyers, the ones that are really want the latest gadget now. There's early adopters, and those early adopters will get it once it's actually out. They're the first main users. But then there's this we call it a scary chasm, a big drop, where many companies, many technologies don't make it to the mainstream. The mainstream is broken down into your early majority and your late majority. The laggards are people that never get on board with technology. But getting to the mainstream is when they make money. That's when it's going to be sustainable. So that's why a lot of startups fail. Well, it's the early adopters. What you need to understand, again, being aware of of others around you. You have to understand that early adopters, the way they buy or the criteria that they use to buy is very different than the criteria that early majority buyers use to make their purchases. And it's not like you can say, oh, well, I have all these buyers already, I'm a startup and I have this cool technology and I already have a bunch of early adopters. I have all these buyers, as references, and the early adopters are not going to trust the opinions of the early majority will not trust the opinions of the early adopters. That's like you telling me, oh, look, these teenagers, in middle school bought my product, and yeah, well, they're probably stupid. That's what I would probably think. So that's really a lot of the behavior. Now, let me give you the technology view, not the buyer view. The technology view is shown this way. You can see that the curve is very different. Okay, this is a model that Gartner Group uses, and this is as of July 2016. There's a whole host of technologies here, cognitive early advisors, which is at the very top. You can see that autonomous vehicles, nanotube electronics, UAVs, the drones. Now this is 18 months ago, and the slope, the basic sections of this cycle are the innovation triggers. That's like something was invented, or it's going to be used for the first time. Not used, but they're creating it, and they're starting to get media, and that's where you get to the peak of inflated expectations. It was a little bit overhyped. I mean, everyone was hearing about drones. I mean, every article was all about drones, and then of course every article was about machine learning and AI and all that stuff. Well, inevitably, those inflated expectations aren't met by the technology itself because it's still early. Right? And as such, they fall into what's called the trough of disillusionment. A lot of them die here. and as a technology itself. This is before it even goes to market. A lot of them die here. And very few will actually make it out of that trough because they went back, they try to fix a lot of things and so forth. So then they get into the slope of enlightenment and reach the plateau of productivity. So I was looking for smart dust, which is in the bottom left, because smart dust is something I remember from UCSD and from a brilliant professor, it's a nanotech invention, from a brilliant professor at University of California, San Diego. He is a distinguished professor of chemistry, Dr. Mike Saylor. And he happens to also be on my advisory board for NanoTecNexus. So I know him really well, and I knew about this. It was sitting on tech transfer at UCSD for a while. Finally, somebody did license it, so I'm glad at least it's making it this far to show up there. But as I did that, and of course, I spent time trying to see, okay, where are these really now? Because this is 18 months old. Where are these now? And then, as I was looking for smart dust details, I found the July 2017. So you can see how they've moved. And, I was delighted to see that, where I was predicting that they'd move, even though I didn't do a deep analysis on all of these, is where Gardner Group shows them as well. But I did get a few things wrong. I expected augmented reality to actually have moved a little bit further. And virtual reality is actually changed from being scored as a 5 to 10 year projection for mainstream. It's actually now 2 to 5 year projection. So things change. Gardner Group has a lot of resources and they track these things in detail. So now a little bit about my neck of the woods, which is nanotechnology. And you can see that for 25 years or so, all it was a lot of basic research. And, but before I even go further on this, let me give you a few data points to illustrate some of my points from earlier. In 1990, the race to sequence the human genome begins, okay? I knew nothing about this at the time. In 1995, Compaq recruited me from Hewlett-Packard and I moved to Houston. In 97, I quit Compaq, didn't really like Houston that much, went back to the Bay Area and I joined Tandem Computers. I used to joke that they paid $3 billion to get me back. And in 98, Compaq acquires Digital Equipment Corporation. That's DEC. And in 2000, J. Craig Venter and Francis Collins were they were the first to completely sequence an entire human genome. They won the 10-year race. This was really a race. So many institutions and countries everywhere were racing to be the first ones to do this. So it was, pretty monumental. This is not that different than the space race of the 60s, okay? So, so that was great, that was 2000. In 2001, the dot-com bubble bursts. You might say that many of these, or the vast majority of these, have nothing in common, but that is not so. You see, in 2001, in 2000, when this announcement happened, I was back, obviously, with Compaq because they bought Tandem, and they acquired Digital Equipment Corporation, and it so happened that it was the DEC high-performance computing platform that allowed Venter and Collins to complete and be the first to complete that sequencing, because it took a lot of technology, a lot of horsepower. So even though, before we were mortal enemies with the DEC people, and I was part of the Tandem division, I was not part of the invited people to, for this celebration. But something told me I need to go there, and so I crashed the party, and they had all these presentations about it. And it was at that time that a light bulb went off in my head and said, wow, I thought this is, the first time you can see in a big way how the convergence of technology and life sciences has a big impact. They need each other a lot. And I didn't know anything about life sciences. I had been I was a developer when I first started at the database labs at HP. I can't develop my way out of a paper bag nowadays, of course, but that's what I was doing at the time. But I had moved into product management and all this other stuff. So I was paying attention to what was going on in terms of technology. So that got my attention. In 2001, I was one of the thousands of fortunate high-tech people that were laid off because of that bubble burst. So, back to this. You see 2000, 2005, well, what was happening on the nanotech world, again, this is before I even came into the picture, was that in 1999, Mikhail Rocco, considered to be the grandfather of nanotechnology, submitted a proposal to Bill Clinton for the creation of the National Nanotechnology Initiative. And you see Bill Clinton on the top right, promoting it everywhere, saying, we are going to have this nanotechnology initiative. He was being like JFK, we are going to be the first ones to the moon, all that stuff. So this initiated the next race in technology. With the nanotechnology, everyone wanted to get that killer app. Well, due to the fact that he got impeached, he never got to actually sign it, so it was George W. that signed it in 2003, okay? Between late 2001, when I got laid off, and 2003, because I already knew about nanotechnology in computer components like memory and storage, I understood the trends towards miniaturization. When I coupled that with the trends in life science and technology, I thought, I gotta do something. So I started in San Francisco. I started to get my feet wet in an industry group that was called NanoBio Forum. But in 2003, we sort of were forced to move to San Diego from the Bay Area. It's not like they kicked us out of the city, like I've been kicked out of better places, but no, actually my husband's job moved there, and he said, if you want to keep it, and I was saying, if you want to keep it, you need to move down there. So there we go, we moved our family to San Diego. Well, there was nothing going on in San Diego in regards to nanotechnology, at least from the industry and trends from the business side. There were, research institutes, doing a lot in nanotechnology research, but it was not known and stuff. So I decided in 2003, after we moved there in August, that I would start my own group, and that was NanoTecNexus. So here I am, I don't know anybody there in San Diego, and I don't have a science degree. My degree's in technology and business. So no science degree, and major research institute, but by March 2004, I had built a team. I had gotten a little bit of startup funding, and I launched NanoBioNexus. And that was the organization that was focused on, technology where nano and bio meet. That was sort of my tagline that I would use. And it was after that, of course, I know some of these people here signing. There's Josh Wolf on the right. He was a industry analyst for Lux Capital at the time, and now he's a managing director, a partner. There's Steve Jurvetson on the back. He's like the fourth one to the left. Actually, well, to my left, to your left too. And Steve Jurvetson is from Draper Fisher Jurvetson, venture capital firm, and and he's made a lot of money. He is also a partner, of course. It's his firm. He coincidentally was an early investor in the SpaceX and in Tesla companies from Elon Musk. So he's made a lot of he's mega rich. Now he had to, okay, here's the gossip. He just recently had to step down. They basically, he had to step down from his role at Draper Fisher Jurvetson, as well as his board seats from SpaceX and Tesla because of sexual harassment allegations. So it's like, oh well, just like, well, I won't say anything more. Anyway, there's Sean Murdoch and a few other people that I had the fortune of knowing in my work at Nanotechnology. I spent more than 10 years there. So like I said, I launched in 2014. I launched in 2004. You can see it's still going there. So I was paying attention, okay, to what was going on, and I saw the opportunity and I went for it. My organization went very actively up until 2014, and then life happens, and so basically I had to stop investing in that area. I've been on sabbatical for the last year and a half, and really enjoying it. But now I'm opening my sights also much bigger than just nanotechnology. Besides the work that organization, it pretty much ran its course from the standpoint of really you're promoting and bringing research institutes, venture capitalists, and companies together to really accelerate the commercialization. So enough about this part, and let's jump into lesson 3. The other ones will go hopefully a lot faster. Work patterns, behaviors, and options change fast. Now we're talking about work, the work area. Right now, this is what we can see, that workers are a lot more overwhelmed because 41% of the time they're doing things that aren't personally fulfilling, they don't get satisfaction, and it doesn't really let them get their work done. So 2/3 of them say, I don't have the time to even do my real work because of all this other BS stuff that I have to do. They're a lot more distracted, by being online more times. In the early days, it was 5 times a day. Today is now 27 times a day. They're a lot more impatient. People can hardly sit for a 4-minute video. And designers, online designers, have now between 5 and 10 seconds to grab the attention of your viewers or your audience. And all in all, of course there's a lot of interruptions all the time that you see. In a typical work week, they only have 1% of the time to focus on personal or development and training. So this is no laughing matter. So you have to figure out how to navigate this. In fact, it's been calculated, I guess, at 1,246,133,850 hours are wasted every year. And even though there's numbers, sometimes bosses or the leadership of companies don't believe it, they can't acknowledge it. Why? Because they're not in the trenches where the workers are. So if you manage your schedules or to-do lists and things like that, your action items like this, you've already fallen way behind. And then you'll find yourself, looking at your kids and saying, gosh, yeah, I was young once, when I was 30. Young like you, because literally, this is a reflection of me. I didn't have a cell phone until I was an adult. Until I was out of college, and that was from work. I didn't have my own laptop until I was a professional in the workforce as well. So it happens. So let's see. Now lesson 4, the moments of impact. This is really all about design. The author is Lisa K. Solomon. This is a best-selling, and she basically talks about design. I'm going to share some of the things, some of the teachings in this book. So first, if you make decisions that affect other people, you are a designer. These people are all designers. I'm sure you recognize some of those famous people there. So now I want to ask you, how many of you think of yourself as a designer? Excellent. I'm very glad to hear that because very quickly somebody says, no, I'm not a designer. It's like, I want to choke them. Sorry. Oh, was that using my out loud voice? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what design is, because this is, I think, very enlightening in some ways. There is design as an artifact. Do anybody know what this is?
Juicer.
Oh, good. You've seen it. Oh.
Donald Norman has one.
$1? What?
Donald Norman has one.
I want one so badly because it's so cool, and it evokes this emotion in me. It's like so cool, and it's $105.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it's $105, and I was like,
Really
I'm thinking
sweet.
maybe I can like get it for Christmas. And I was working on this presentation. My husband comes by, and he sees it, and I'm like, he says, no. We don't need it. You already have an electric one and stuff. And besides, you hardly ever use it. Like, oh yes, that's true. So anyway, but hey, anybody here, you can do a pool, you can collect.
That's what you want for Christmas.
All right, there's design as performance, right? So like, these really fancy, smancy, beautiful cars. And what we call those, basically, they have a lot of functional utility. There's design as an experience, like the Cirque du Soleil. What that evokes is emotional engagement, okay? When you bring those two together, you have a really, really good design. Again, it doesn't matter what it is. This umbrella has a totally different design. It's upside down. Now, how long have we had umbrellas? For many, I don't know when it was first invented, but it's upside down, and I'm not superstitious. But now, it's like this. Now, why was this design completely changed? And wow, why didn't anybody do this before? Well, what happens when you have it open? There's water, right? Now, guess what? The water stays in there. And you can take it inside, you can put it in your car, and you're not getting everything wet. All right, this is called the Better umbrella. That's what they call it. And they're not expensive, but it's just a totally different design. Yeah, it's really awesome. There are some collapsible ones. So there's design as value creation, like that one. It creates some value because it's not getting all my stuff wet. I'm not dripping where I go in. But an example here is Nest. It's a great design, but it also gives you value, and you can monitor or change the temperature in your house before you get home. There's value creation such as Airbnb that completely disrupted the sort of the hotel model for travelers. And so therefore, again, restating, if you make decisions that affect other people, you are a designer. Because design at the end of the day is just a craft applied to a discipline. So this can go across many disciplines. Whatever it is that you're doing, you could identify or discover something that's different, and you go through all these iterations and trying to, study it a little bit. That builds your understanding, right? From that understanding, now you can explore or experiment a little bit, and by doing so, and the findings, it shapes your choices. Now that you have your choices, now you can research and prioritize, right? Which ones you're going to pursue, and that, of course, leads to making your decisions. From there on, you align your resources and you execute. So again, it can be applied to anything. And in your guys' case for business web services, I happened to be at this talk given by Paul Reynolds. He was formerly at Magic Leap. Anybody know Magic Leap? Okay.
Wasn't that something? Was it Leap or Magic Leap?
It's Magic Leap, the
Okay.
name of the company. It's a startup that is 10 years old, based out of Florida. a startup that has already accumulated $1.4 billion of funding, a startup that has not released any products as of yet, and a startup that just weeks ago received another $502 million of funding. Yes, imagine. And this $502 million of that round was led by a firm in Singapore, I forget the name, but it also included Google, Alibaba, and Tesla. They're investors. Why do you think that they are investing that much money? They don't have a product yet. So VCs do like to throw money at technologies that are really promising. Look at what they did with Theranos. Theranos was billions of dollars, and the CEO was a gal, very, very smart gal out of Stanford, and it was for
Blood testing?
Yes, good. Who said that?
$50.
Oh, I didn't offer it. I wasn't testing you, but no, I'm impressed. Yes, and that ended up failing. Okay, because of how things were managed, and everyone was like trashing her as the CEO, but I don't buy that. It's like, okay, what happened to overseeing by the VCs? The VCs have seats on the board already. They put their money in there. They want to know what's going on. So the VCs were extremely culpable in those decisions that were made and what was happening. They cannot say that they were lied to. So anyway, that's just my opinion. But the other company was Juicero. Juicero, the juice thing, you know, and that also, a lot of money went down the toilet. But they're doing that with Magic Leap. So I'm paying attention, of course, right? And they're stealth, so you can't really find anything online, but MIT Review has done some articles. Anyway, Paul Reynolds left Magic Leap, moved to Portland, and so he did this talk on design, and his parting thoughts were, thoughtful design always wins over novelty. So keep that in mind. He said, ask yourself 2 questions. Is it better than how people do it now? And more importantly, is this building a world I want to live in? So you need to ask yourself those important questions. Would you use it? It's like, I see so many user interfaces that I'm like, seriously, did anybody really put it through any usability? You know, did anybody really check through this? And like, so it's amazing how much trash there's out there. So watch out for that. And as John Maeda says, at least for now, design is a human skill that certainly for right now, not even Google can automate. And John Maeda is someone that you should follow or research. He is a partner at Kleiner Perkins, big VC house in Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto. They are huge investors. And he actually has, this year, he did his 2nd report on design. So there's a 2016 and a 2017. Look it up, Google him, and look at those reports because it is on design, and I think it's design in general, design principles. So doing all the things that all these people are doing takes risk-taking, okay? So, and I think everyone understands that it's critical and that there's a lot of benefits to taking risks, but it's still so rare. So despite all these benefits here, it's rare because people focus on the costs of taking the risk. That it'll create uncertainty, it opens possibilities of failure, it requires energy and effort, it exposes my weaknesses, it feels uncomfortable. You can tell I'm a risk taker. It's like, okay, well, if you want those benefits, you have to take risks, but there's a better way to take risks, and that's called smart risks, because the limitations that cause that fear creates a mindset that feeds the paralysis perception, that you have your comfort zone and everything else to the right is the perceived risk. You know, the uncertainty, the comfort, all that stuff. So, to risk or not to risk? You can say that is the question. But I'll tell you this, it's not the right question. The right question is, the right thing to look at is your doing safe risks. And in order to do that, first you have to find your SWIFT. Your SWIFT is something worth fighting for, okay? Something you're willing to actually take the risks, that inspires you, that motivates you, and maybe even those around you. So the SWIFT, the reason this is so important is that it can, by itself, move you from a limiting mindset to a liberating mindset, okay? So the limiting mindset tells you the time isn't right, my ideas aren't really good enough, I'm not sure what I'm doing, I don't want to make mistakes, I'll regret it if I fail. By contrast, the liberating mindset will focus you on the things that you would be losing out on if you don't take the risk. The timing will never be perfect. My ideas are good enough. I mean, there's certainly a lot of junk out there, but they're good enough to get started. I won't know what I'm doing until I'm actually doing it. And experimentation drives growth. Again, you have to look at it as an experiment, not the all end all. And I will regret it if I don't try. Now, that liberating mindset creates the power perception. Now you have what's called really that smart risk zone, because that focuses on the growth and the progress and so forth. And now the danger zone is actually a lot less. So your chances to increase growth or whatever you want to do are also increased. So here's the 5 major actions for taking smart risks. You find your SWIFT, something we're fighting for. You see the future. Again, this is based on my points earlier in terms of self-awareness of your EQ, but also understanding trends and what affects what. Then you act fast and learn fast, like the wolf. And that is, you make your moves. You communicate powerfully. I'll say a little bit about that. And then you want to encourage that risk culture around you, with your peers, with your fellow classmates, with everyone that you can. Why? Because then you are going to be, you feed off of each other, and you get better and better, and you exchange information. Before, venture capitalists used to tell entrepreneurs, think big, start small, and scale fast. Why? Because they wanted that startup to have a big presence, everywhere, and spend a lot of money to have a big presence. That's not the case anymore. That has changed, from a trend perspective. Now it's think big, start small, fail fast. Because they realize, why should we spend money on inventory of products, big manufacturing, all that stuff, when you haven't really literally tested, how it's going to come out. So failing fast links back to experimentation, right? Safe risks or smart risks. There's no such thing as a safe risk. That's an oxymoron. Smart risks. And it goes back to, again, paying attention and knowing your customers. So when it comes to risk-taking, if you look at those actions, you'll see that only 20% is actual risk-taking, the act fast, learn fast. Before that, if you followed this, you would have spent 40% of the time in planning and preparation, and then you spend, at the end, 40% of the time communicating it powerfully so that people get it, so that they can climb on board. Okay? So now lesson 7. I give this lesson to my son, who is a little bit risk averse. Sometimes I wonder, gosh, are you really my son? But but he's risk averse. He's very cautious. But I'm working on him. So I tell him this. Well, one person hesitates because they feel inferior. Others are busy making mistakes to becoming superior. So I didn't know anything about nanotechnology. I mean, not anything, not to be running an organization with MD PhDs and double PhDs, working for me, and attorneys throwing money at me to make this happen. Why? Because it was a patent play for them, and because I had all these connections, that I made. And I didn't know anything about the pharmaceutical industry, and yet I was approached by Pharmatech Europe magazine to do a story on whether nanotechnology was the lifeline for the pharmaceutical industry. And I did it, and the only 3 other people that were part of that interview was the inventor of nanocrystals, One Technology, a professor in the UK, and I forget who the other person was. Anyway, but people that have been doing this for years. So you just can't be afraid to take risks. So in terms of communicating it powerfully, and we're almost there, folks. You don't sell a product, you sell a whole new way of thinking. So now you might be thinking, geez, Adriana, I'm not a salesperson, I'm not selling products, I'm a web designer, or a developer, or what have you. Well then, I would do the Jules response. Oh, you're finished? Okay, well, allow me to retort. And basically I would say, you sell your ideas to your colleagues, to your bosses. You sell yourself in interviews. You're always selling something. If you're trying to influence, you're selling. So this is something you need to keep in mind. And with that, now I can tell you that data, information, and value propositions no longer cut it. So for you analyticals, the tendency is for you to give them data sheets and all this manual and documentation that's detailed. That doesn't cut it. Whereas before, buyers would say, I will believe it when I see it. So all the documentation, a lot of times the documentation would help. But now it's even worse. Now the thinking is, I will see it when I believe it. So what does that mean? Let me tell you a story. In 1840, there was a doctor, medical doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis. He was an Austrian physician. And he made this observation that when doctors would wash their hands before treating patients, they would, the incidence of deaths from this puerperal fever that was going on at the time was reducing. And he studied this for a while, he collected all this data, and he went to his colleagues, other physicians, and he said, hey, here's all the data, and I can show you through all this data, observations, very detailed. Every time that doctors wash their hands, the patient does better. But at the time, the physicians said, you're crazy, man, because they had this mental model that all diseases were contained inside the body, and people would get sick from an imbalance of some of these bodily humors like bile and blood and phlegm and other things. So when you had that imbalance, that's what made you sick. So how could something that's external to the body have an impact on the disease, which is all internal? this mental model was so strong that they actually committed this doctor to a mental institution, and his wife also, committed him. So rough crowd, right? So he failed. What happened? A couple of decades later, Louis Pasteur proved that germs cause disease and not the humors. Okay, so when he showed these germs, and these germs, actually exist on the outside, those were actually causing the disease. Now they say, wow, okay, so it changed their perspective. So Semmelweis couldn't convince his colleagues because he was saying washing hands. And if you sell it a different way, again, you have to sell the new way of thinking, is the bottom line. So first you need to create that mental model, and that's what innovators do. Because for anything really new, there is no real mental model. There wasn't a mental model for PayPal before it came around. And so is the case for all these other innovations. They change the lenses through which we see the world. So if you can do that, you're gonna do very well. And let's not forget, one prime example is Steve Jobs, who's known as the great mind shifter of our times. And of course, there's a lot of others. That's why Elon Musk is like, hey, we're going to do space travel and colonization. So of course, there will be people who don't want to believe you, or don't want to say when you're trying to sell this new mental model. They're going to be stuck. So don't let those clowns or bozos influence you or really stop you. And if that doesn't work, then take a tip from Robert Downey Jr. You kind of have to have that attitude. And boy, I love him too. So here's an example of some that even people who were very high up and pillars, like Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM in 1943, said, I think there's maybe a world market for maybe 5 computers. That was his thinking back then. Ken Olsen, founder of DEC, Digital Equipment, in 1977 says, there's no reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. This is why they missed the laptop market or the personal computer market. That's why Compaq, became such a leader, and others followed, like Hewlett Packard followed and so forth. But Compaq was the original leader in home computers and PCs. And I knew it because I used to study Compaq as a competitor. And then even Western Union, way back in 1876. This telephone has too many shortcomings. How can it be seriously considered as a means of communication? It has inherently no value. That's what they were saying about the telephone. So, they get stuck in one way of thinking. That's why it's so important to break out of that if you want to take advantage of opportunities. So that's where you come in as a designer. Okay, design your life, design your products well, design your career, design your path and your happiness. Any questions? Come on, I dare you. I double dare you.
They're waiting for the cash.
Now, I hope you found these nuggets useful. I know I threw a lot at you, but I guarantee you there's so much behind each one of those. But I thought at least touching on some of these would help you in some way or another.
Chrissy has a question.
Yes.
So the guy Reynolds, was it?
Paul Reynolds?
Paul Reynolds. Where can I find his that talk or something that he was getting? Do you have any idea?
Yes, it's probably, I don't know if this one was recorded, but The talk was given through Virtual Reality PDX. It's a meetup group. They have meetings once a month in downtown Portland. And I go to a lot of those because virtual VR, AR, and mixed reality is something that I'm tracking as well. So look up the meetup group, look at past events, and see if there is, his talk. Again, I'm not sure, I don't recall if that one was recorded or not. Yes?
On that innovation graph, where
Uh-huh.
you had all the different types of technologies and stuff like that, and that part, you called it the trough of disillusionment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see of any examples of stuff that's in or about in the trough of disillusionment that might be pushed out of it based on something coming up?
Oh, very good question. Yeah, that would be like an enabler.
Yeah, like a new innovation hasn't caught up to the technology that already exists in the
Yes,
trough of disillusionment.
because that happens. Sometimes some innovations are ahead of its time. And I know one of my clients out of the UK had this nanotechnology, and their goal is the $1,000 genome. But that's like the holy grail as far as that's concerned. And but some technologies are still not there to really help them happen. That's a real hard one because I've been on sabbatical, man. Geez, like that they're there right now. Now you'd have to pay me a lot of money to really tell you that.
Well, like with the case with the
because I would have to do some work and analyze things.
With the case with augmented reality, I mean, augmented reality has been out for a long time, but it hasn't been until the advent of like smartphones to where it's become really viable to like everybody else, to a mass population, right?
Oh, no. Well, okay, so that's a form of augmented reality. It's not the promise of augmented reality, okay? So augmented reality has a much bigger promise, and that really literally is, okay, remember Google Glass?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that one, of course, failed. It had some problems, but that's really essentially augmented reality, where you can actually see and look up things. Like I run into you in the street. If I was a very powerful, rich person, I'd have my assistant and say, okay, who's that? And then it's like, oh yeah, hi, I remember you, and so, but I didn't remember. Well, you can actually see that information because there'll be facial recognition. So that's like one of the technologies, facial recognition. That is very well underway at this time. I actually attended the GPU conference May of last year in San Jose, California. I saw the first police car, autonomous police car that's already being tested in LA. And it had a drone, it had, of course, the LiDAR technology, it had facial recognition so that it could find persons of interest, and it just patrols, and it's really cool, really awesome. But let me finish. Okay, shoot. Oh no, it was still your question. So that's like one of them, but the promise of AR is really to be able to access data in a way that doesn't interfere with what you're trying to do. But who's going to be wearing a head mount thing? Now there's a company here.
RealWear.
Yeah, and that is for specific jobs. A lot of times these field jobs, whether it's installing cables or doing system engineering on site at a customer or something. Now you don't have to have the expert going out there because they're expensive. The expert can sit back here and just like feed. They can see what's going on. They can feed. In fact, we did this virtually. Like I was in Austin, Texas, at my brother's house, and he had a leak. So I opened up the wall, and I had my husband on Skype, and so he was saying, okay, look at this or look for that and stuff like that, and we were doing that. Anyway, so there is a lot more that goes onto it, but AR is the main play for Magic Leap. So that's why I'm kind of surprised that Gartner actually has it stalled where it is. And maybe they're just not, maybe they just don't really want to bank on it too much. But there are also companies in the UK and Sweden, I think in Israel, doing augmented reality. They have that in some cars now, right? Where you can see data. So it's not really mainstream yet, but it's not the Pokemon Go and.
Well, yeah, I mean, to make it commercially viable and as far as to make everybody aware to mass population, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's not going to be the end-all be-all of augmented reality, but to create awareness to regular people.
Yeah, there's actually some trickier things, and this is why there's some analysts that have doubts on Magic Leap. There's some tricky elements of augmented reality, technical tricky elements that they haven't really figured out, otherwise they'd already have the product. But I come back to the points I made about smart risks, and you have to go for it. And even what Guy Kawasaki will tell you is, or like, don't listen to the bozos because they're thinking only, like, it can only be done this way. If you really ignore this and you sort of keep on working, you're gonna crack it. Okay? You had
Was there somebody over there?
okay, I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, I have a question. I don't know if I was the next, but I was curious. Have you heard of the concept of black swan, where the idea is that you have trend, you'll see say a trend developing, but then some outlier will overwhelm everything, and that seems to be the history, right? And the other part of that is that none of this is predictable, so you can do all the analysis you want, and you're probably going to be wrong most of the time. So the best you can do is try to prepare for all these changes, so you do what your investors are doing. They're investing in every damn thing they can. But in terms of actually making predictions, I don't know. So
right. So, but there's a lot of criteria based on a lot of experience in terms of, well, will this company really make it? Who's the leadership? Who's behind it? Who's advisors and stuff? I mean, there is a lot of. It's like placing really smart bets. It's like horses. You can bet on multiple horses. Yes, but.
But I think that's the only. I guess that was the conclusion I would say from this guy, this Black Swan author's model, is that I can't predict. Forget it. So all I'm going to do is do my best to be prepared for when something explodes.
Yes.
So I will try to place my bets, if you can, smartly, so that they're in a lot of different places. But I'm not going to be able to predict which one's going to blow up. So
right. Yeah, I invest in the stock market. And I was fortunate to have bought Apple when it was $9 a share. That was a long time ago. Do you have a question?
Yep. I was just wondering if you followed, because you were just talking about the stock market, if you followed cryptocurrency at all, and where would you place that on that spectrum?
Yeah, the Bitcoin, that pisses me off so much. I'm sorry.
So what did you buy for?
My out loud. No, it's like, to me, I'm also practical. I don't know enough about it. I'm not interested enough about it to learn. And it's like, you know what? When it's really mainstream, I'll take it more seriously. Right now, it's like it's too complicated, and you don't see really what's going on.
Right.
So
it's complicated in the States. I know it's big outside of the States.
Yeah, because of currency, because of political,
But I mean, the real value of the Bitcoin deal is the blockchain, is how they're recording transactions. That's right. The currency itself is kind of
well, that's true. So blockchain is another one. Guess what? That one is right now at the height of expectations. Inflated expectations. So I've got it on my to-do list to start looking at that.
Distributed
more.
ledger. That's what it's.
I have a friend that's pretty invested in Bitcoin, so he's an extremely happy man right now.
Well, yes,
So.
that's the thing. If you get in early, and you have your reasons for, taking those risks. That's great.
He got in early when they were still about $100 a share. So
Good for him.
Now, so he's
good for him. I want to
On
meet him.
paper, he's a very rich man.
right on paper. That's why I was just like, I've always been a doubter. He tried to get me to go in early on it too, but I was like, dude, I don't know about that weird stuff. Like, that's out of my knowledge realm. So.
Yeah. Well, depending on how much credibility he has, and then you can learn more about it. So show me why.
He's been trying to teach me. He has a degree in finance from WSU.
Oh, well, that's
and so that's one of his.
Yeah, that's his area of expertise. Yeah. Well, blockchain is definitely yes.
So actually, a quick first. So Google Glass is actually back, which I thought was interesting. We're going under a different name now. Second question. Asked a lot of people this, but you probably the first person who can actually give me an answer that would matter. You said you dabbled into VR and AR. Where do you see the future of VR? Because for me personally, I didn't know it was as advancedly developed as it is, or at least as far along in development as it is. And I was curious as to where you see it for the future, because it seems like a lot of people are scattered based on whether or not they've used VR or not.
Very good question. And I can tell you, in fact, I was a speaker at the VR Summit in New York in 2016, April. And then I also spoke at the VR Summit in San Diego in December of 2016. So I've been tracking this for a while. And there are an amazing number of applications that you wouldn't think are great uses for VR, practical applications. VR can be used, in fact, neuroscientists are looking at that to solve issues of depression and PTSD and others, as an example, to cope with either grief or cancer patients. I had a cancer doctor out of San Francisco contact me because of something that I had published. Said, "Can you tell me and stuff, because I've been trying to get this," and so forth. There was a project out of MIT, students out of MIT, who formed a company to use VR as a means to help dementia, and it's with really great results. And in fact, there's also, so there was them at MIT. There's another company in the UK doing that at some institutes there or facilities there. And there is a doctor in San Francisco who was an emergency doctor in Hawaii, moved to San Francisco and is using that for her patients. And she even created a company with some curated content specifically to help her patients.
I wouldn't really say any of that is mainstream yet, though. Like, I'm curious if you think it'll actually hit that point, or just be like certain groups using it.
The issue, and in fact, I did a pitch, at Startup Week, for that, but you only have a weekend to create the whole plan and stuff, and it got some traction, but there's still, it's like, what kind of business model would work best for that? And then you have to have the content, a lot of this content, there's a lot of content out there, but you have to license it and so forth, and how, and there's right now, the pieces aren't totally in place, because there's like little starts that are coming from one side, like, where there's gaming or so forth, there's other starts and other, some are doing it for promotional basis. But what would work then better for elderly?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I just wanted to.
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part.
It's also
so
technology,
yeah.
and technology changes so fast, and specialized equipment like that is going to be useless in 6 months.
Yes, in fact, the Institute for, what's it called? In LA, there's actually the Institute for Creative Technologies. Institute for Creative Technologies. I actually invited one of the guys there to be on my panel in San Diego. And he actually get a load of this. They do all this advanced research, and the great thing about this institute is that they do it because they're government funded, or those projects are government funded. They will need to put this out as common source. What's the term?
Open source.
Open source. Yes. I was losing my terms on open source. So they were the ones that, in fact, the founder of the Vive.
Oh, which one?
Your Oculus guy?
Mr. Vive.
HTC.
Which one? The Oculus?
No,
or Vive?
the Oculus. I'm sorry, the Oculus.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's not the founder. The founder
No,
is,
the founder is a younger guy.
yeah, I'm trying to remember his name.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Basically, he was doing he was a student and he was doing an internship there. And somebody, there was some research going on, something having to do with your eyes, maybe macular degeneration or something. And somebody did mention the term Oculus. And he said, wow, that's like a really cool name. If I start a company, I'm gonna name it Oculus. And then they of course, were also doing, because it's a visual thing, they were doing some early head-mount displays, HMDs. And he took some of that, knowledge that he had built, went off, and he started Oculus. So yes, technology, materials, that's where nanotechnology comes in, nanomaterials that do a better job. There's progress happening that all converge. Sometimes those are heavy. They need to be smaller, easier.
Wireless.
Yes, of course. Not tethered, and you have to. The visual is only one sense, but what happens? I've used these. I have one. When you put it on, it's like the first thing you want to do is like, oh, that's so cool, and you want to touch it. Okay, I didn't learn when I was a kid. Don't touch. I want to touch it. I want to grab it. I want to feel it, and of course, there's nothing there. Well, exactly the haptics. That nanotechnology is very involved in that, in the haptics for the gloves. Yeah.
The
So
knuckles, or whatever they're called. That's new ones that they're talking about, the knuckles that are actually gloves.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, so there's different designs, right, to accomplish some of these, or to solve some of these problems. Different design attempts, design approaches. So I love this. I love what's going on, and that's what I have my business in. I want to help companies, be able to figure out, okay, how can they do some strategic planning.
A lot of the information I'm hearing here on the trends is some of this things like a national and global level. What trends are you seeing here in Portland, like those of us, like, as we're graduating and doing, should we be looking forward, or what's kind of the feel of the Portland vibe for trends in technology in comparison to like what you're showing on the list? Not like inclusive thing, but like anything stands out?
Do you want me to be nice, or do you want me to be
truthful?
honest?
You can turn it off the camera if you want.
just cover it.
All right, goodbye, everybody.
No, okay, so I'm pleased to see that there's new clusters forming. There's a cluster in the VR, AR, and how did these happen here? Well, they started getting smart and taking advantage of platforms like Meetup. So Meetup has become, it used to be something for just sort of get-togethers or something. Now it's actually becoming more of a real platform for events for leaders to do things. And so they gather people, and the virtual reality, the PDX, virtual reality PDX, and the new tech PDX in Portland, those are pretty good because they're showing new technology. They have speakers, they have demos, and so forth. I saw a underwater drone. Yes, an underwater drone. And the thing, it's the main thing is kind of like this ball, and it's like so heavy, like you can't really pick it up, but it doesn't matter in the water, right? I mean, it's supposed to go down, but it's of course sealed and everything because it's got a camera and you're able to see what's, it's like an unmanned spacecraft, right? Under the water, but now you can do it yourself. It doesn't cost the millions of dollars that you would need, that researchers.
Is it untethered?
Yes.
Remote.
Yeah, drones are untethered. They fly and They can videotape things from the top. What?
I said otherwise it's a kite.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, good point.
Aren't they kind of like remote controlled, those little car, the cars people that do with remote control?
Yeah, RFCs, yeah.
So do we have any other companies in the Vancouver area other than RealWare, or?
Yeah, well, not that many, and I have not really, truthfully, I've not spent a lot of time focusing in this area because here's where the brutal honesty is. There's nothing really exciting for me here, but that's just, again, my personal thing, and I don't mean to put anything down. Or put anyone down in any way. I'm just.
So what I'm hearing is that there's opportunity for Vancouver to start being more forward thinking. Is what I hear.
Very good. I'm glad you surmised that. Yes, there is, because now you have now there's the bridge, from Dave Barkos, who you heard speak not too long ago. And I've been to some of his things. I mean, he started really small, and it takes working at it. And like I didn't attend before. I was like, but now I've gone to a few of the things, and it's good because it brings people out of the woodworks who have some ideas. You want to be around people who have ideas, who are innovative in thinking. Maybe if you're not so much of a risk taker, you can get a little inoculated, or. But it's good. But Portland, of course, has a lot more traction. Portland is attracting companies, but it's very expensive. Again, now here comes the politics and government and stuff like that, local government. And the traffic is huge. Now I'm from Austin. Well, I used to live in Austin, Texas. And that's still the fastest growing city, and it's like traffic is worse. In San Diego, one of the highways was 8 lanes, and it was still backed up. 8 lanes, especially around the Golden Triangle area.
What do you think Vancouver needs to do to be a city like Portland as far as being a progressive tech center?
More education.
More education, yeah.
Well, and it's education at the city level. They need to really be able to hear and get help in establishing visions. A vision, not visions like.
To attract those companies here.
To attract the companies here. Yes, because there's a lot of good benefits here. Now, I only moved over here because there's an HP site here. My husband still works for HP, and we saw the writing on the wall in San Diego because the home, house bubble burst everywhere over there. In fact, we were already selling it. We were trying to sell it before we moved. We had, $1 million plus offer for a house which was like 45 years old, and was, it was on a quarter acre, but but it was old. It was not a brand new house by any means, and over $1 million, and but then so we had the offer. The very next day in the paper, it was like, front page, the housing bubble burst, things like that. And it's like, that offer disappeared immediately. So it wasn't, then we waited until the following year.
Just like tech bubbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that happens. Any other questions? I love all the questions.
Chan has one.
Just off topic
Yes.
a bit. I just want to know your opinion about smart home.
About smart homes?
Yeah.
So, like whether it's a good idea or
whether it would be a good idea or would just flop down, go mainstream or flop.
Well, here's the thing. My gut opinion right now, just right off the bat, is it probably won't go far. It's not going to reach, the number of users that we think. And here's the reasons. First, people who are homeowners, first of all, there's the aging population. The aging population is the biggest population segment that there is today. okay? And I have graphs to show that. So there's that, but you couple with the fact that there's urbanization now happening more and more, and the fact that younger couples are really opting actually out of buying homes. Instead, they just want to either lease or rent. Why? Because these young people, they don't want to be bothered with having to mow the lawn and all this stuff and all the maintenance. Really, it's a different mindset. Even your your Y gens, but certainly your X gens, aren't really that interested in buying homes. They're also not interested in having big families. So why would you invest so much in having that all automated? If you're one of those innovator or early adopters of technology just because you want to be cool and you have like bragging rights, then that's fine. You can install it in your apartment, but then it's like, okay, what? Turn on the lights or whatever. I just don't think it'll go very far. Do you have a different opinion? I'd like to know.
Not entirely, because I was kind of surprised because you said young people are just not really into buying a house or more of renting places. Do you think technology is gonna change, just depend on the people? Really?
Well, that's certainly one of the factors. Security is another factor, because security is there's so much hacking. What's to prevent somebody from hacking, your house and unlocking it? Now there's no break-ins.
Amazon key.
Okay. Back there. You. Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Oh, no worries. What I see as the things for, I understand the hacking and the security risks, but in terms of it being a progressive thing, it could actually save energy. Because there are things like being able to turn your heat off when you're not home and then turn it on before you get home so your house is warm by the time you get there, but you haven't been wasting all of that energy in the interim.
The Nest is already doing that.
Pardon me?
The Nest is already doing that.
The Nest?
Nest thermostat.
Yeah.
The Nest
smart
thermostat.
yeah.
It already does that.
My thermostat
that's not
does that.
the
It's functionality. I just set it for
Yes.
schedule.
Well, the hacking thing kind of played into it a little bit, but do you think that degree of connectivity and exactly who's putting out the product and everything generates a certain degree of paranoia that might steer people away from it? Just the other day, my girlfriend came to me. It's like, hey, did you know that Facebook monitors our conversations to advertise to us? Yes, hon, they've been doing that for years.
Yes. Okay. So let me so two things. Yes, definitely. All the when credit cards came out, you never hear about this, of course. And actually, I'm sure that came out way before my time. But it has been a trend now. Every 12 to 18 months, we get a brand new Visa card from our bank, Chase Bank or Bank of America. And it doesn't matter. It's like you get a brand new one. Why? Because some vendor, was compromised, and some credit card numbers were compromised. So you get a brand new one, and they don't even tell you. There's no accountability for those vendors. It's like, really, folks? Okay, make them pay so that they can have better security. Anyway, that aside, get off the soapbox. There's so now that ends up impacting people the way they think. Then you start trusting less. Maybe not so much being paranoid, but we freeze our credit. We have our credit frozen, because in this way, if our numbers get compromised, nobody can open a new credit line. Not even us. We have to literally unfreeze it if we want to do that. So we take precautions. Why? Because of that. Now, when I was at that GPU conference, so my biggest focus was all AI and stuff like that. And I would talk to all these different companies, and I would tell them, after a while, we'd have conversations, and I'd ask them, so what do you think about this? Where do you think this is really, heading? Or what do you think about, blah, blah, blah. and they say, oh man, it's scary as shit. You know, they are right in the middle of it, working for these companies, doing all this AI and stuff. And because they understand what's actually possible, you know, they're you know, it scares them, but they're doing their job. Yes.
Speaking of AI, what was her name? Melody Zacharias, Bruce? As Kill Saturday?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Melody Zacharias.
She
Yes.
spoke on artificial intelligence with business intelligence.
Oh yes. You know, so AI in retail, other than healthcare, it's like one of the biggest growing segments. There are hundreds of companies, of startups, focused on AI just for retail. But then not just retail. There's also what's called fintech, as technology, AI technology for financial institutions. There, I mean, you know, a lot of these analysts are not going to stand a chance. I mean, I'm basically out of a job when everyone has some ability to do AI to analyze what's going on in some areas, if you know how to run those things.
An automated service that can not only run all the numbers, but can actually learn based on trends that it's already seen and everything.
Exactly.
Basically does the same job as a person in the same industry.
Data is king.
Data,
You do
yeah.
hidden figures where you learn how to program Fortran punch cards.
Exactly.
Like you
Exactly.
work with it.
Yep. Exactly, because a computer does it much, much faster. Yes.
Seeing as how most of your forte you said was in nanotechnology, correct?
No, I did a lot of high tech and some biotech.
I ask only because I wanted to get your opinion on like nanotechnology within alternative energy, as far as like, do you see it in solar, geothermal, hydroelectric? I mean, are they starting to make headways in that area as well?
Oh yeah, well, there's certainly there's fuel cells, right? There are. I remember, gosh, it was mid 2000. I think it was around 2007 or 8. I already knew of an Israeli company that was actually figured out how to do the little lines, you know, on those cells, the solar cells.
Mm-hmm.
Not only smaller, but also just more accurate, because there was a lot of leakage. There, you know, the technology when it first started, there was definitely a lot of leakage. That's why you had to have so many panels. And now this will reduce the number of panels and obviously the efficiency and the cost that comes along with it. So we didn't get solar panels because we didn't stay very long in any one place. You know, for 25 years we had like 9 addresses or something in it for a while. So it's like, oh, forget, don't have a little black book on me. In fact, some of my friends said, hey, I'm gonna throw the book, you know, that I have on you. But yeah, we didn't do that because it would take 20 plus years to recoup your investment on those solar panels.
Okay.
And they say, yeah, we'll finance it and stuff. Well, you know, I haven't tracked, you know, alternative energy, but I can. There's things like geothermal energy. There's, I think Google was making a lot of investment in that area, in the energy. And in fact, there's one prediction of Google being the, and in fact, it's in this megatrends of Google being the power, the energy provider.
Oh wow. Because there's a lot of windmills and stuff like that in California. I know that they buy, if they buy stuff, I mean, as far as energy wise, it'd probably end up being wind.
Mm-hmm. I have a close friend of mine who's really, really brilliant, but doesn't really have a really great EQ. You know what I mean? But he's brilliant. Has a PhD, has an MBA, has a computer science degree and stuff, and in finance as well. So he was doing, his expertise was focused on doing a lot of planning and financial costs and proposals for energy companies. And he would be, you know, he would go up and took a picture on top of one of those windmills.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was really, he sent it to me one time. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty.
What do you think about chat-based?
Chat-based, yes. So like chatbots?
Well, Google has in their R&D area, you know, whatever the 120 room is, and I guess some pretty big companies have been doing the adopted thing that you were talking about. It adopted it early and have been using it, and it does. It would affect an analytics person because it basically takes care of that and then informs the chatbots to be more user friendly, since it's coming right at a good time where chatbots are getting a real bad rap for not being very usable or user friendly. And
well,
I was wondering if you.
You know that's, you know, I always like to use analogies, but the saying oh my God, bird of a feather, you know, birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. The thing with chatbots is that they do learn, right? You know, they're not just fixed. I mean, they're fixed and you tell them, okay, what to do. Well, they're not going to realize, they're not going to be smart enough to know how best to respond.
Right, chat-based brings the machine learning.
But guess what?
To the chat.
Depending on who's using it, just like the first major Microsoft chatbot that got corrupted real quickly because the people that were feeding it all these things. Yeah, so there's a lot of like, you know, not danger, but it has a lot of problems that it can't really solve. It'll take a while. And I mean, it's fine that there's companies that jump in early and they, you know, gives them some bragging rights and they can use that as a tool to kind of sell. I mean, they know how to milk it.
It just went public on the 18th of November, so I was curious.
Good.
Right. Any other questions for Adriana? No? Adriana, did you have a question?
It's because I came in later, so I don't know. So where are you? Is your company based?
It's actually based right now, but yeah, I'm because I live here now.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But not NanoTecNexus. So NanoTecNexus, I've got it on ice because I'm on sabbatical right now, and you know, life happens, things like that. So it's on that, but I'm focused now just specifically on my consulting under the MarketTecNexus, where I bring, you know, my marketing expertise, business expertise with technology expertise to offer services. I've got cards here if anybody wants to either email me if you have any other questions, or if you want the soft copy of the technology, the megatrends, I can send it to you.
So I was wondering, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, like right around 4. I don't know if you started presenting right at 4 or not, but
right. No, I didn't.
Those glove things that when you're doing virtual reality you can maybe start touching. Was it haptic? Is that what it's called?
Haptic.
Yes. I heard, I don't know how long ago it was, probably less than a year, maybe a year ago, but it was students in UW were creating a glove that would do that. And I don't know if it was like, did you work with those people, or did this thing get created?
So Deneen, who is the top, you know, the head of their virtual, I mean,
is she the redhead lady that's
yes.
overall?
Yeah.
Dee? Yeah, we had her in Chris's class.
Well, yeah, but in UW in Seattle, there's some people doing that too.
Oh, yeah. Well, so the one here, the branch here, I saw their center, and I was really impressed with what they put together. I think that's really great, and to the extent that they can get funding or projects that they can do together with some companies, that would be great. So if I decide to do what I was thinking of doing, I will definitely look at collaborating with them.
Awesome.
Because what I like to do is, and I did that because I used to have interns as well from UCSD, from the School of Engineering or the School of Nanoengineering, you know, so they have their own program. And I like to give them real world problems to work on, because to me, that's how you really learn more. And to the extent that they're willing to work hard and not be prissy, you know, not be prima donnas or anything like that, then I give them a lot of opportunities. So, you know, I think I will pursue that. It's a really great start.
Well, thank you, Adriana. Thank you.